record on this computer, and we'll see what happens. So I've got a bit of screen sharing and things to do. So it'll be interesting to see if the actual technology works for me. But basically, what I want to do is go through. We'll talk about training today. So go through, I guess, my general philosophy of strength training, and look at strength qualities as they relate to rep ranges, and then talk about beginner training and the progression of rep ranges to take a beginner towards immediate or intermediate and advanced, if that makes sense. So this is share. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
All right. So this is what I call the pyramid of intensity. And this is basically a diagram that I have put together to, I've been using it for probably a couple of years now to basically describe or put a visual on my general philosophy with strength training. Hello, mate.
Hey, mate. Sorry I'm late.
No dramas, no dramas. We're literally just starting. So this this diagram up the top here, so 1 and the Hunji, that is representative of a 1RM, your 1RM max. So the most that you could pull in a deadlift or something like that. And then as the numbers go down, this is increasing rep ranges and the general percentage of what your 1RM is for these rep ranges. And so if a 1RM was to, like, the heaviest load that you can pull, so say it was in a deadlift powerlifting competition, and you're going to pull your 1RM, that would be 100% of your 100% of your strength. Actually, on top of the way I think about strength training in terms of how the nervous system works with it, at the very top of the actual pyramid, up above it here, would be what they call hysterical strength. And hysterical strength is the situation you hear about where a mother lifts a car off a child in some sort of emergency situation. So essentially what's happening with that is that the signal of the emergency is so extreme and so intense that you send a huge signal through your central nervous system, through the vagus nerve, to recruit every single muscle fiber that you have to express as much possible force that is capable within you, and that is the most strength that you could possibly output, and they call that hysterical strength. And it can only really be achieved in a life or death situation. But the closest thing, I guess, back of that would be this example of a powerlifting comp where you're going to break a record or set a massive PB, and there's a crowd in there and everyone's pumped, and you pull the biggest, heaviest deadlift that you could possibly pull. We're actually training the same system as as what would happen in an emergency. And as you get further down the rep ranges and the reps get higher, you're just tapping into that system at a slightly lower level all the way down. But essentially what strength is, as you build strength and develop strength, you're basically training the efficiency of your nervous system, the efficiency of you to send the signal from your brain to lift the thing and coordinate and recruit all the muscle fibers that you have to lift the thing. And then the more muscle that you have as you hypertrophy and you get bigger, then the more muscle that is available to be recruited to express force with. So that's kind of the concept of how I view strength training. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any questions on any of that? No, all good. So we'll start to go through these strength qualities. So at the top, has anyone done powerlifting before? Casey? So what was your, in the last few weeks leading up to the comp, what was your training like? Like, what kind of rep ranges were you doing?
I'd never competed,
Right.
but my coach got me to always do between, like, when it got to testing, it was like I got to 6 reps, 4 reps.
6?
Yeah.
Or 4s?
Yeah.
Right. So you would train with 4s and 6s, and then you tested your 1RMs after a block of training with 4s and 6s.
Yeah, but I do admit that coach wasn't very good, so I didn't take much from them.
Right.
Also, but yeah.
Yeah, so someone who maybe does compete in powerlifting and is more advanced, the final block of their training, they're going to be doing some work in the 1s and 3s. So they're probably in that 1 to 3 rep range. It could be 3 sets of 3 or 8 sets of 3, and you practice some singles so you get good at lifting heavy loads. And so what you're doing in this context is you are developing maximal strength. Can you guys see that typing on the thing?
No.
So maximal strength is the strength quality that we would assign to 1s, 2s, and 3s in terms of rep ranges. Okay? So the next step down from that, which is kind of where what Casey was doing, would be relative strength. Have you guys heard of these terms before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So relative strength is basically like the classic relative strength training system would be like a 5x5. So you're doing 5 sets of 5 reps. And if you think about what that stimulus is, if you were doing, say, deadlift or bench press, it's not going to build a ton of muscle, but it is going to develop a lot of strength. So you're not necessarily, if you were just using this sort of stimulus, you're not going to put on a ton of mass, so you're not going to get heavy, but you'll get very strong. So you're developing your strength relative to your body weight, hence the terminology relative strength. That make sense?
Yep.
Any questions there? No, all good. So our next bracket down, and so relative strength, your 5x5, so anywhere from sort of 4 to 6 reps in that zone is, and it's a bit of a spectrum. They sort of bleed into each other a little bit, but anywhere 3, 4, 5, and 6, we're into the relative strength zone. So the next bracket we call functional hypertrophy. Have you heard of this terminology?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so functional hypertrophy, we're looking at 6s and 8s. So a simple system might be like a 5x6 to 8. It could be wave loading like 642 or 846 or something like that. But we're not we're getting some hypertrophy stimulus. So 8s are giving you enough time under tension and enough volume there to start building some muscle tissue and causing some hypertrophy. The 6s are low enough that you're also developing a nice amount of strength relative to that muscle that you have. So it's right in the sweet spot in between relative strength and traditional hypertrophy training. So they call that functional hypertrophy because you're building muscle mass that is useful, that you can develop force with. And so this is great for athletes who want to put on a little bit of size, but they need to be strong. Whereas relative strength, if you were a strength athlete and you were competing in a weight class, and you had to try and keep your weight down, then you probably would spend as much time as you can in the relative strength world so that you're not getting too big, but you're getting very strong, if that kind of makes sense. And then this big bracket in the middle, this is hypertrophy, which obviously we're all very aware of. And so anywhere from sort of 8s to 15s, 16s hypertrophy work. And then in the sort of the textbook definition, the next bracket from sort of 15 to 30, they kind of call that strength endurance. But I don't really think of these reps as strength endurance. Really, I think everything from hypertrophy down all the way to 30 reps, whatever it is, if you're taking those repetitions close enough to failure, it's going to be a hypertrophy stimulus. As you're fatiguing all muscle fibers, you're building up a lot of metabolic stress, and it's a good stimulus for growth. So really what's relevant with the stuff that we do with guys, and we're programming strength training to get people in shape and get them strong. We're working primarily in the hypertrophy range. And ultimately, if people are getting stronger and they're training for long enough, my goal with clients is to actually start them where they need to start, which we'll talk about in a second, and actually try and work them up the pyramid towards the top. So a beginner client might start. Well, what sort of rep ranges do you guys use in your first phase of training for just your standard general pop beginner client?
Uh, I'll generally start with a 10 to 12
10 to
in a lot of
12.
cases.
Yeah, me too. So that's basically where I would start. So usually in the first phase of training, I'm doing 12s. They might get some 10s if they've had a little bit of an athletic background. There'll probably be some 14s and 16s in the accessory work. But yes, I'm starting them at this point in the pyramid, around about that 10 to 12 mark. And that's where the big beginner goes. And my goal is to develop their strength and periodize training programs over time and work them up to the pyramid so they can start actually doing some work in the relative strength zone up here. So the thing with strength training, from my opinion, is you haven't really tapped into all that you have until you've started to develop your relative strength. So once you get strong, you can then choose what you want to do, whether you want to just keep working on strength work or you want to go back down to the bottom of the pyramid and start training in hypertrophy. And then you get a lot more out of 10 to 12s as someone who's intermediate to advanced, having done some strength work, than the beginner who starts at 10s and 12, because necessarily that's where they need to start. So the world of options that you have in terms of what you can do with strength training doesn't really get opened until you've developed some level of strength relative to your body weight. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Does anyone like to sort of chuck in some options as to why that might be the case? Like, what are some of the benefits of doing that strength work? Anyone?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Tommy?
So what would be some of the benefits of developing relative strength and doing some lower rep ranges?
So in context of, say, someone is coming in for fat loss or body composition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So chucking in those relative strengths or those lower rep ranges, you want to build the amount of muscle fibers they can recruit. If you train them to be able to recruit more of those muscle fibers, they're going to get better quality workouts in. And say after a phase of strength, you chuck them into another phase of hypertrophy, they're going to be able to push heavier for those rep ranges, which will ensure better quality workout and better quality results.
Perfect. Great answer. So that's, I mean, I would give 100% marks there. Anything else anyone would like to chuck in? So one of the things that's a little bit sort of left of center of that is like a lot of the actual structural balance and the integrity and postural alignment. I find with clients from experience, they actually develop that better once they've started working into some of those functional hypertrophy and relative strength ranges. So once you've used a bit of load like that, all the ligaments and tendons around the joints, they strengthen and thicken and get stronger as well. So you get that exposure. And as good as corrective exercises are for correcting posture, to actually lift, say a 5x5 on a bench press or a dumbbell press, you need to have that really good scapular retraction. You need to have strength and coordination. It's been in this position for multiple sets, for multiple reps, that develops like strong, good upper back posture. So I think a lot of the postural realignment and changes that clients want when they come in to start training is best achieved by actually developing their strength and getting them strong. And basically what Jordo was talking about is what we're doing is we're developing their nervous system. So they're getting more efficient at strength training and they're developing the skill of what strength training actually is. All good?
Yep.
So with these strength qualities in mind, what I would do, why don't we talk about why a beginner would start in these 10s and 12s. So a beginner client comes in. Let me just actually, I'll see if I can get a fresh thing. All right, clear. So we're looking at a beginner in at 10s and 12s. Why would we start them there? What are the things that a beginner client needs when they come in to start training?
like neurological coordination,
Yes.
risk of injury. Obviously, you want to try and prevent as much risk to injury. By doing this will help that, and obviously learning neurological coordination, balance, movement pattern will obviously then be more effective than going up. Before you just skip that part and go, could then get injury. Movement patterns are wrong, techniques wrong, that you could learn in that phase and missed.
Exactly. So if you're going to achieve all these things, so like the motor learning and the skill development and the movement patterns, what develops that is repetitions and frequency. So you want to expose them to a decent amount of reps, so they get to practice the movement for for a decent amount of time and attention, and you want to expose them to these movements frequently. So if they're doing, did we talk about volume, frequency, and intensity last week? We might have touched on it just very briefly. That's actually important. I'll do it here.
It was mainly just screening stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so intensity, volume, frequency. Have you guys heard of these terms before? Yeah.
Yep.
So these are our three variables that we use in programming for strength training. So intensity refers to the weight on the bar. So high intensity would be up in the relative strength, maximal strength, functional hypertrophy. That's high intensity training up in this bracket. Volume refers to the amount of work that they're doing in terms of reps and sets. So how many reps and how many sets of said reps. So how much work are they doing? Frequency refers to how frequently you're training a body part or a movement pattern within the microcycle of training, within the weekly block of training. So these are the three things that make up the three parameters that you play with when you're designing a training program. And the perfect program, which there is no such thing, but the best way to get as big and strong as you possibly could would be to train with high intensity, lift heaps of heavy weights for lots of reps and sets, and do it every day. But that's impossible to do. So do you get that concept? Yeah. So we have to pick, you got to sort of choose which of these you're going to lean on. And we know for a beginner, intensity's out of the equation because they don't have any of that neurological development. They don't have the motor learning. They don't have the integrity of their joints or any of that kind of stuff. So they just can't lift heavy weights. So with beginners, you're manipulating volume and frequency. And so these are the two that you can lean on. And so if we're programming 10s and 12s, that means they can be working with those rep ranges quite frequently. So they can be training 3 or 4 times a week, doing the same movement patterns, the same workouts over again, because it's easier to recover from when there's not so much intensity. And that's when they get the great benefit of the motor learning, because they get frequent exposure to the movement patterns. So with an initial block of training for you guys, with an initial phase, how many workouts do you typically give a general pop beginner client in their first phase of training?
How much they can do, to be honest.
It kind of depends.
Sorry, not as many, not the frequency of workouts, but the actual splits. How many days in the split?
How many days, as in how many days they train?
How many workouts in the initial phase of programming? Like, is it a 2-day split? Is it a 4-day split? Do you understand?
Oh, okay. Usually around that 4 mark.
Yeah. 4.
I'd push more if they're asking, like if they have the availability to do so, then I'd give it.
Right, and so if they're doing 4 workouts a week, you write them 4 separate workouts.
Yep.
And they do 4 different workouts each week.
Not always. I tend to, if they're doing 4 days a week training, for example, I'll usually do day 1, day 3 of the same workout, day 2, day 4 of the same workout, and at the most, I might change the order of exercises.
Sure. Okay.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah. And so we're talking about, and are they total body workouts?
Usually I go, if it's 3 days, they're training, I'll do a whole body. If it's 4 days, I'll do, so for example, maybe quads and back, and then posterior and chest, or something along the lines.
Do a bit of a split. Yeah. So when if I'm programming for a beginner general population client, I usually do just 2 workouts. So day 1, day 2, and they go back and forth between those two workouts and their total body workouts. So they'll be pushing and pulling and upper and lower supersetted in all the workouts. So they're two total body workouts, anywhere from sort of 10 to 12 to 14 reps, and they might be just 10 workouts in the first block. So it might be 5 rotations that they have to do of each 2 days. And the reason why I do that is because it's simple, and because they get the frequency of exposure to the movement patterns, and it's not too complicated. There's not too much stuff to learn. It's just the 2 workouts, and I get the benefits of the motor learning, the movement patterns. If the exercise selection is appropriate, and then using a full range of motion for what they can do within the exercise regression, they get the mobility benefits. Something else that they'll develop and that you want an initial client to do is work capacity. So by doing these higher reps with short rest periods, you actually develop the ability to train. So to actually start to push them harder, and they can actually start getting some meaningful workouts in. So workout capacity is another thing that you want for a beginner client. These are the reasons why I would choose that. Now, it's certainly not wrong to do 4 workouts to give them a body part split or anything like that. I just find with 2 total body workouts, it's super easy. It's very simple. The programs are a breeze to write. It takes 2 seconds. They're easy to pump out, and they're easy for the client to get their head around and start getting used to these movement patterns. Once they've got through that first block, I can then look at if I want to split them up and give them more of a body part split, maybe a 3-day program, day 1, day 2, day 3, which they do on a rotation. Or I might just keep the 2 workouts and push them a little further with that, and just manipulate some exercises and change the rep ranges a little bit. So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, are there anything else that would, any other factors that we would chuck in as to what a beginner client needs out of a program?
I think it kind of depends on the beginner, but in saying that, most of them I do need this unilateral work.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically in the A series, I'll find if I'm putting any. Sorry, you thought I was talking on.
No.
I would put my unilateral work in the A series and focusing on that in the first block, just to build up some of those movement patterns as well.
Yes.
And kind of see the differences between left and right arm or leg or whatever, pick those up and strengthen those.
Yep.
That's something I'm throwing a lot to my beginner programs.
Yeah, I do the same thing. So the A series, I will do unilateral work. So they'll be doing single arm, single leg. And then I'll put them into more compound movements in the Bs. And the reason why I do that is, A, for the structural balance that, Jordan, you're talking about, but also it just gets their body warm and their nervous system on before they start moving into compound lifts that have that a slightly higher risk of injury early on. So the body's on, everything's switched on. You can get them into a trap bar deadlift or a rack pull or something like that, and there's less concern about a little back tweaking or anything like that, because they're warm and they're already into it. It's like an active component of a warm-up or such, but it's actually they're doing accessory work at the start. So that's why I would have the unilateral work in the A's, move them to the compounds in the B's.
In your mind, sorry, is there ever a time you would switch that and put the unilateral work in the B's?
100%. So we're talking about the beginner first phase of training.
Yeah.
So as they move up the pyramid, for instance, in subsequent phases of training, like if you're up here in the...
you would have your compounds first.
You'd probably have your compounds first, yeah.
Okay. I was just clarifying. That's what I do. I'm just making sure I'm doing it right.
Yeah. And look, there's no right or wrong. Like you can... So the key thing with all of this is you just need to be able to rationalize why you're doing what you're doing. So you could start with compounds. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do the unilaterals and the accessory work. There's nothing wrong with that. All of these things work. It's all great. You just need to know the reason why you're actually doing it. Yeah, but certainly, traditionally speaking, like once you're in these lower rep ranges working at high intensity, typically you would start with those compound lifts first. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll get up this. Okay, clear all drawings. Right, so that's Okay, hang on. That's not what I'm after. One sec. Okay. Right. Can you guys see that?
No.
Can't see that? Okay, hang on. Right. Share screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so you guys know what a macrocycle, a mesocycle, and a microcycle is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put it up here. Why not? So the macrocycle would be the entire block of training. It could be like a year's worth of training. If it's, say, what your clients are signing up for, a macrocycle might be just that 13-week block. So they're signing up for a 13-week package. So essentially that 13 weeks becomes the macrocycle. And then within that 13 weeks, they might do, the starting week and then 3 phases of 4-week blocks. Is that what they kind of do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So each one of those 4-week blocks is a mesocycle. And then each week of that training program becomes the microcycle. Okay. So, and what I've got written here is basically a progression of how I would take a beginner client from that 12 to 14 rep range beginner thing that we looked at the pyramid, and work them up over time into functional hypertrophy or relative strength training. So all right, where are we? So phase 1, program 1, mesocycle 1, 10 to 14 reps for the primary lifts and 12 to 16 for the accessories. So they might be doing A1, A2, a unilateral, say a split squat and a dumbbell row. So like a lower body push with an upper body pull. And they do, 2 to 3 sets, 2 to 4 sets of 10 to 12 reps. And then they move into the compound lifts, which might be a lower body pull, so a trap bar deadlift, and then an upper body press, maybe a dumbbell press. And so those would be compounds, and they'd be maybe doing 10s there if they're a little bit stronger, but 10 to 12 there. And then the corrective and the accessory work would be 12 to 16. So they might be doing a face pull or some lateral raises or a bicep curl, whatever it is. So I'd be chucking a bit more volume in there. So I get them through their first block of training. And then the reps start to come down a little bit. So if they have a little bit of strength potential and they look like they're, maybe they've got an athletic background and they move well and they can handle some decent training, maybe they drop down those accessory, the compound lifts go to 8 to 10. Then they do accessories 10 to 12. And then the corrective work 12 to 14. So I've just dropped the reps by just a little bracket to the next phase. And essentially, you can follow that kind of pattern over each week, over each block of training, and work them down to where we're in either 4 to 6s, which is functional hypertrophy, or the 2 to 4s, which would be your relative strength. And the accessories, you can still keep a bit of volume in the accessories here, and you could make these 16s or whatever they are, but so that's where those kind of rep ranges be. You could either keep them lower as well and just keep working on strength, or if you want to get some volume in there, you can do that as well. If they're a fat loss client, you still want to develop their strength, but you still want them to be doing some work, keep the reps high in the accessories, and maybe put some kettlebell swings or some sled pulls or some metabolic work in there as well. But that's kind of how I would structure a progression over time.
As they get lower down the pyramid and you're moving towards the 4 to 6 and 2 to 4 reps, how would you properly warm up where they're not ruining their sets? Like pushing the workout.
Yeah. So a couple of options there. Like if they're a good client and they're keen and they're willing to come in 10 or 15 minutes early, get their rack set up, and get a couple of warm-up sets out of the way. then you can, when you come over as the coach, you can then say, okay, where are we? Okay, our working weight last week was 50. So you've just done a warm up at 30. All right, let's do another warm up at 40. See how that goes. Then we'll get 50 on there. Do 2 reps at 50. Then we'll have a little breather and we'll come back and start the working set. So that would be an ideal way to have it. Lots of clients don't do that. So what you might have to do is actually program a few more sets. So they might be doing 6 sets of their 4 to 6s, and they come in and the first 2 sets are kind of like warm-up sets. But you write down the numbers and you track it, but then you sort of ramp the load as the sets go on.
Okay.
Yeah. And so something like a traditional 5x5, a relative strength training system, as 25 reps. And ideally, you would pick a weight that there's, say it's 100 kilos for your bench press and you want to get it to 110. You'd start at 100 kilos and you try and get all 25 reps, 5 sets of 5 reps with 100. Then next workout, you go to 102 and you try and get all 25 reps. If you only get 4 reps on the last set, you only got 24, and you come back to 102 again the next week until you get all 5. And then that's how the progression would go. So that's traditionally how it's done. But if you're doing it with general population clients and they come in and they start at 60 and get a set, then they go to 70, then they go to 80, then they go to 90, they get 100 on their last one, then you might come in next week and start at 65 or 75 and just ramp them up in terms of that. That's more efficient. It's less taxing. It doesn't take as long, but they still get some strength benefit out of that process.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I gotta get ready for work now, so I gotta leave. But
No
this is
worries,
really
man.
interesting. I actually like this.
Okay. Cool, mate. We'll talk about it much more.
Okay.
All right, man. See ya.
All right,
Bye.
see you
Take it
guys.
easy. See you, Josh. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions at that?
That makes sense.
No. All right. Should we have a look at like some rep schemes that are actually relevant to each? See if I can do this share. Okay. Can you see?
Yeah, frozen.
Hang on. Can you see that?
Yeah.
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 Okay. Right. So we'll start at the top. So relative strength. What would or maximal strength? So some traditional. Do you guys have any? Are there powerlifters and strength athletes in there? Not really. Okay. We won't worry too much about that. We'll go.
Yeah, but not like powerlifting.
Yeah. So, and do you guys take? Do you have clients that are doing some lower reps, 4s and 6s, or 6 to 8s? Like, how do the progressions go?
Progressions go in terms of rep ranges.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, like what would just like a bit of an overview of an example of how a 13-week block might progress.
Depends. At the moment, have more undulating. So I might go
Right.
a 10 to 12, and then I might go, for example, a tricep or something like that, and then I might go an EDT, for example, and then I might bring it back into a 6 to 8.
Nice. Okay.
So that's kind of more so the pathway I take. But I've also gone as simple as 10 to 12, 8 to 10, 6 to 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a bit of both.
A little bit of both. And so the EDT, that's like escalating density training.
Yeah.
And so you would be doing like a 10 rep max that they do for 6 reps back and forth between 2 exercises for 20 minutes.
Yes. Yeah. I sometimes play with that a little bit, but generally yes.
Yeah. So the first time that I did EDT, I was doing 2s. So you get a 6 rep max and you just do 2 reps, and you go back and forth for the 20 minutes, and it's awesome. It's a great block of training. But once again, to get benefit out of that, you need to have actually spent some time up the top in the 4s to 6s to actually know what your true 6 is. So you might do you know, a one phase of a 5x5 or a 4x6, then you might move into like a 6x4, and you've got super strong, and you say, okay, let's change it up a bit. Let's do an EDT. I know what my numbers are for a good heavy 6. Have that weight in the bar, and you do your 2 reps back and forth for 20 minutes. Great block of training. So what we'll do...
So for me then, sorry, Tommy, it would be better if I brought my 6 to 8 forward by a mesocycle and then push the EDT back to after that in that situation.
Potentially, they might get more benefit out of the EDT, having had some exposure to some functional hypertrophy.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Because I usually like the way I just described, I usually use that methodology to bring volume up. If I'm playing, like that's my thinking: bring volume up, bring volume up, bring volume up, and then my 6 to 8 is kind of all right. Bring volume back down, and move away from volume-based training and hit more the intensification phase.
Yeah,
But that was my thinking behind what I was just saying. But hearing you say that makes me think, right, maybe I should adjust.
Well, I mean, it's not a bad rationale that you've put forward. Like, I wouldn't argue with that. Like, the first time they do EDT training, they love it. Like, it's great. It's an awesome system if you've got clients that jibber jabber a little bit. You just get them set up. The 20 minutes on the clock, you know they're going to go back and forth, and there's that competitive element to it. So what you could do is do exactly what you've done. Take them into, so do the EDT, take them into the 6x8, and then maybe after the 6 to 8, you take them further into some intensity. They could do some 4 to 6s, or you know, 4 sets of 4 to 6, or maybe a wave load, maybe like 6 sets, 8-6-4, 8-6-4, something like that. Develop a bit of strength off the back of the 6 to 8s, take it further, then chuck them into another cycle of EDT, but rather than 6 reps at a 10 rep max, you give them the 2s at a 6 rep max.
Yeah, okay.
And that can be like, you know, 26 weeks of training mapped out in front of them, and they're like, oh, fuck, I get EDT again, and I get high intensity EDT in, you know, another 10 weeks. Let's fucking stay focused and re-sign, do another block, you know?
Yeah.
And so this is, like, one of the benefits of this is that, like, if you, like, from my perspective, when I have this general plan or philosophy around how I coach and I program, I talk to my clients about this. I can bring out the pyramid in a consultation or something, and we can look and like explain the rationale behind the journey and get them excited about strength training. And I'm mapping out a you know, months of potential periodization and training that they could get to, and sell them on that vision of the future of developing their strength and having that process. So it's having a bigger picture in your own mind for your client and letting them know what that is great for retention. So let's go functional hypertrophy. So in this zone here, and we can talk about some training systems that would make up functional hypertrophy. So your 5 by 6 to 8, that would be functional hypertrophy. You could do the 6 sets of the wave load we were talking about, which would be 8-6-4, 8-6-4. Do you guys use wave loading at all?
I do. The main one I use is actually 10-8-6.
A 10-8-6, yeah. So that would be, that one's probably just at the bottom of hypertrophy. Yeah, but also a great system. 10-8-6, 10-8-6. And would you program that with supersets, like an A1, A2? Yeah. Awesome. You could do in the functional hypertrophy like a real basic descending step load. So it could be like 8-8-6-6-4-4. And if you were doing that in hypertrophy world, it could be 10-10-8-8-6-6. Starting to the concept starting to land.
Yeah.
And so, like, what are some of the challenges that you've faced with program design? Like, do you find yourselves in situations to be like, I'm not sure what to give this person or what's appropriate, or what are some of the things that come up?
I feel like before, like say if I've got a client now who I've had for a year and a half or so, 2 years,
Right.
when I started with them back then, my like thinking ahead, my ability to think ahead wasn't as strong. So now sometimes I'm like, okay, I've got to reset this and kind of, you know what I mean? I've done what I've done with them already, but roadmap it from here. Whereas when I get a fresh client, it's like, cool, I can roadmap for years. So I think my greatest challenge is just keeping a roadmap for the ones who started with me before I kind of had the skills to do this, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. Just keeping it fresh.
Yeah. Like definitely I find it easier to program for the guys who have started with me, say this year compared to start of last year.
Right. Right.
Just
Right.
because
Right.
my the start of the journey was clearer and I had a clearer vision of what I wanted to do as compared to back then, if that makes
Right.
sense.
And is that based off the fact that they had clearer goals themselves at the start?
No, to be honest, I think it was my own ability.
Your own ability.
Um,
Yeah.
so just me being better at doing these kinds of things now.
Yeah.
So I get a fresh client, it's like cool, like easy. I can roadmap it. You know, what I mean, I can adapt it as I need to.
Yeah.
But clients who have started with me, say start of last year, I can still do that. I can still program for them effectively.
Yeah.
But there's the element of okay, the first few phases I may not have been as clear as to where I wanted to take them.
Sure.
Now
Sure.
I'm just making sure, like, not damage control as such, but it's like, okay, this is the start I had. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of just stabilizing it now.
And do you have an idea, like, is there a vision in your head of what your ultimate goal for all of your clients is? Like, if you had the perfect client, like what that goal is?
Yes. Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
Yes. But that obviously would depend on their goal as well. Like if they want to lose a bunch of weight, if they're starting where they're obese, or if
Yeah.
they're starting where they're skinny and wanted to build up, or
Yeah.
but yes.
Yeah, yeah. So this is something that's big for me. So I have my goal for my clients is basically for them to be like me, to have the sort of relationship that I have with training and food. I would like to impart that to my clients. So
Yeah.
I love training. I train, 4 to 6 times a week, every week, all the time because it's what I do and I love it. My scale weight maybe fluctuates a kilo or two over the course of a year, but I'm always in shape. I'm always happy with the way my physique feels. I'm never really hungry. Like I push through a little bits of hunger here and there, and I get to enjoy nice food. But basically, my nutrition is set up that I can regulate what I'm doing. I don't have to weigh anything out. It's not a challenge I don't have any emotional barriers or connections or flare ups with certain kinds of foods. I don't feel restricted with what I can eat, but I generally eat very well. So everything's in this nice balance that keeps me happy and is easy to maintain and enables me to focus on running my business and spending time with my wife and having a nice life. And so my goal for my clients, and I have several of them now that have trained for 5 years or so, and it's just what they do. They come in for their training, 3 times a week, because it's something that they value and it's a core part of their life and how they actually live. It's important for them to run their business or to do what they do. They like to feel good. They like to look good in clothes. They like to enjoy the food that they eat if they go out for dinner and not have to stress about it. But they also see the value in eating clean and feeling light and having good digestion and generally being healthy. So that's and to actually, so to get to that point is one big journey in itself, to get to a place where you're actually happy and can start to auto-regulate. But then the process of auto-regulation is an ongoing thing. If you stop training, or you start eating badly or whatever, then it starts to shift. So it actually requires work to keep the auto-regulation happening. And that's why people pay for training ongoing for years and years and years, because it just becomes a key part of their life. And so that's basically the vision that I have in my head, or I write it down like it's something that I'm clear about in terms of how I run my business. That's what I'm trying to offer anyone who signs up.
Yeah.
So it's worth as coaches to think about that, like think about what your philosophies are, think about the values that you want to exhibit and demonstrate in your own life to your clients. Think about the kind of clients that you want, like the ones who are your best clients. Write down what the things are about them that make them great clients and why you like them. So you have like a, it's hard for me to, I'm not someone who has like a demographic in terms of I train executive males who work in the finance sector, or I train, middle-aged women whose kids have just left the house and they want to get back in shape and have time to themselves. I don't target demographics like that. What I have is like psychographics. There are certain qualities that the clients who are attracted to me and who I enjoy training, who stay with me long term, have. And so I make a list of all those sorts of personality traits and types so that I know the kind of person that I want to work with. And it's like just going through the process of identifying all those things. It's like you put it out in the universe, and it starts to, if you're true to it, those are the kind of people that you'll start to attract. That's kind of how I think about them. A little bit airy-fairy, but it works. Well, maybe that's a good place to wrap it up. So 4:20, that was the time allotted. How does that sound for you guys?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Cool.
Well,
Any questions or final things?
no, I was, yeah,
That's
that was
good.
awesome.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah, no problems. Have a good Friday, Arvo, and I guess we'll talk again next week.
Awesome.
Thank
No
you.
worries. Thanks, Tony.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
So yeah, have a good weekend, mate.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.
So-
Bye. Bye.